Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome back. Here's what I have for this episode. There are two subjects specifically that I want to discuss. They are related, and it is that time of year, as it turns out, where the largest American Educational Research Association conference is convening next week. And the first subject that I want to bring up before I bring up the conference and specific elements within the conference and presentations and other subjects associated with it, of course, is the business of artificial intelligence. Now, this is, of course, a subject that I've brought up on the show before. So I know that it's, of course, not new to any of us, and it's not new, certainly, to this audience. But this is one of those things that is going to become far worse, I think, than what many people can possibly imagine. It really is Terminator 2 kind of stuff. They are creating not just, as we know, AI chat boards that do the writing for people who used to write on their own or certainly plagiarize other individuals if they wanted to. But either way, what they are doing, of course, is they're continuously using those particular chat boards in order to publish particular papers, write books. As, of course, I've mentioned here on the show also, there's absolutely nothing saying that an individual or even a student or a teacher or a professor, whomever, could not use AI to basically write an entire book for them. They certainly could. And they are. I mean, this is happening. But where this stretches into educational research conferences is that they're relying on artificial intelligence to shape the way that they think, shape the way that they write, and then shape the way that they perceive the world. Perception is not reality because you can manipulate perception. And of course, we see endless examples of this, certainly within the media and the media's influence over people, and then all of the memes that we've seen with the NPCs, and they get a chip planted into their brain, and then all of a sudden they're interested in the latest thing that's going on, whether it be a war over here, a war over there, a particular trend here, a trend there. See, that's those individuals' perceptions, of course, being manipulated. So that's not reality. Reality is recognizing the manipulation and understanding that people are easily being manipulated. Now, I've brought this up too, and again, you would think that this would bother the vast majority, if not everybody, that when you look at someone and you tell them that they're being manipulated, that you look at someone and you say, you're being lied to. You're unaware that you're being lied to, but if I show you particular things, I can prove to you that you're being lied to. Even when you present something like that, or that kind of a scenario to an individual who you know is being manipulated, who you know that their perception is being thrown off, even they will deny wanting to see the facts. They will actually dig their heels in, as we've all seen with numerous individuals, certainly over the last 4+ years. They'll dig their heels in and they will swear that they are right or that you are wrong in some way, but they won't prove that you're wrong. They'll just think it, and therefore if they think it, then they believe it, and then it must be reality. That's why perception is not reality. It's one of many reasons. But a couple of weeks ago, and this is kind of where I want to start this, just related to, again, artificial intelligence and how it manipulates people, in particular the entire business of education. I came across this article a couple of weeks ago. There's just a few parts of it that I want to read because it's rather self-explanatory. But it was from the website offguardian.org, and it's titled How Generative AI Will Ruin Science and Academic Research. The subtitle is On Late Stage Digitalization and Knowledge Erosion by a Johan Edebo. Again, it's rather self-explanatory, but they start off with referencing a particular book in an individual's work, and then describing again a lot of the hypocrisy in what we're seeing now based on what we already know to be true. And how artificial intelligence is its own dimension in a further negative way that clearly counteracts the Great Awakening and any kind of awakening or waking up process that, of course, endless individuals are experiencing all over the world. It is literally the fight to keep the Great Awakening from occurring. So they are equal and opposite forces pushing against one another or pulling each other in opposite directions. Because as more people wake up, well, there has to be an artificial intelligence then for the asleep individuals to grasp onto so that they can actually look at us and believe that we will believe them when they say something like, well, this over here is real because a computer said so. And then, of course, we look at these people with complete confusion and they don't understand why. But like anybody in any kind of a group, there's a bit of a hive mind mentality that takes place. You're always going to get individuals who agree with one another, hanging out with one another, because we know that birds of a feather flock together. In particular, again, on this giant spectrum of awakening. Now, specifically regarding AI, this is where it goes from, again, I would say, the chat board realm and the image generating realm to, of course, the larger plans that exist, which involve not just computing, but computing within an actual animated robot, one that moves around. Again, this is the plan, and they are doing this. And by they, of course, I mean the Jewish lobby and the Chinese moneylenders and, a number of other individuals that, of course, are all associated with one another because only they would want to create something so transhumanist and unreal and unhuman-like that they, of course, use this to not only distract people, but they're using this to ultimately be relied on for a variety of reasons. Again, not just for potential labor, as we know, but they're actually creating all of this so that humans are so stupid that they rely on these animated, autonomous beings that actually do the thinking and the moving for them. It really is, unfortunately, in my opinion anyway, it's a real metaphor for what we're already seeing right now among the asleep. The asleep are believing people that they've never even met. They're believing the messages that they're saying, the things that they're pushing, and we've, of course, seen this over the last 4 years without really any effort whatsoever. We've seen particular fear tactics be used, of course, demoralization, a number of psychological approaches that have ruined endless people and, of course, caused people to kill themselves over something that isn't even real. Now, again, wrap your head around that one. I mean, people have killed themselves over something that isn't even real. They went home because of the lockdowns, and then they hung themselves from a ceiling fan because they actually locked themselves down because they were actually told that something existed when it didn't. This is one of those things, too. I mean, again, not to get off on a tangent, but it's one of those things, too, that really bothers me because it's in the same wavelength and vernacular of the people who are not awake. As you've heard me say, and as you know, when people say COVID, pandemic, whatever, those people are not awake. There is no COVID. There was no pandemic. Another word that is in that same ballpark is the term lockdown. But see, this right here again, yeah. I mean, somebody says lockdown, and you're like, lockdown? What in the hell are you talking about? We didn't lock ourselves down. What were you doing? And why were you doing it? And who were you doing it for? And again, you hit people with this language and these facts and these questions, of course, critical thinking, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and they start to explode. Why would you do that? There is no COVID. There is no pandemic. There was no lockdown. Just because a stranger told you there was, you just complied. Well, this is what artificial intelligence is essentially doing already. It was just tested out with humans first, and you saw how humans believed random humans that they've never even met before. Imagine if a giant interconnected computer system said the exact same thing also. How many people would then comply? And unfortunately, the answer is a great deal of people. And as you've heard me bring up on the show before, and again, you know this, that this is exactly what the medical system already is. It already is run by artificial intelligence. these hospital conglomerates, these, basic practitioners, these internal specialists, and your family doctor and your pediatrician, they receive emails from some source, from somewhere, generated by something, and then they just blindly believe it, and then they apply it. There's no thought there. There's no research. There's no thinking. There's no critical thinking. There's no application. There's no history involved. There's no looking up history. There's nothing. It's just, I'm reading a message on my computer, I believe it, I give it to people, and then XYZ happens. So much so that the responses to the negative outcome are being justified a million different ways. Not just in the medical field, but of course in the education field as well. Which again is what I'm going to bring up here in just a few minutes. Let me give you a quick jab example first before I give you an education one. I've been receiving some text messages again from a Michigan business friend, and they continuously are telling me that their family members and the people that they know who are jabbed are finding their way into the hospital. One in particular they were describing. And what the doctors told this person, of course, they're multiple jabbed, at least boosted, so they're at least 3 deep. They were told that their potassium levels are remarkably low, so low that this is why they have shortness of breath, heart palpitations, and 1,000 other things. They didn't once mention the shots. Not once. This was never brought up in their conversation with the emergency room doctors. It's potassium levels. And then the doctors reported that, yes, they're seeing this a lot. They're seeing low potassium levels among almost all of the patients that they're seeing who are coming in with very similar symptoms. So they're striking it up to potassium. They're not looking at the other elements that they all have in common. Again, if low potassium levels are to be believed, what's causing the low potassium levels? They don't make that leap. They're not asking one more question. They're just going, well, low potassium levels. Eat more bananas. And then they're even told, the doctors are even telling these patients with low potassium levels who are multiple jabbed, they're saying if you eat 10 plus bananas, that's still not going to get your potassium levels up to where they need to be. It's a complete cooking of the human body from the inside out, and they're not saying what's causing the cooking. What's the thing that you've all done and or been around and or taken that's caused this similarity to exist? Again, artificial intelligence isn't just designed to create an application of a particular thing. It's designed to create a unified response to said thing that is equally, if not more destructive, because like I said earlier, they're doubling down on the rationalization of the thing that they are seeing. So let me tie this back in now to education. I'm going to move away from this article. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll link this article in the description below, and you can give it a read if you're interested. It is very well done. But again, it's not 100% surprising either. It really does have a lot to do, of course, with mind control and manipulation and the blatant hypocrisy that's really at face value regarding all of this. But this really leads me now to something that I want to spend the vast majority of the episode on here, which is the American Educational Research Association's conference for this year. Ironically enough, a couple of things just off the top here before I get into the title and the actual theme, which is a problem in itself. This conference is taking place in Philadelphia. So I can't think of a worse place to have a conference, frankly. This is the same Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where, of course, you're walking down the street and then a random black shoots you in the side of the head and then gets in a car and drives away just for fun. So this is happening on a constant basis, and there's endless videos out there that show this, and this is in the news, and you can check this out yourself. But there are also, within this conference, a total of 1,005 presentations and or papers that are presented. Now, again, a little background on the American Educational Research Association. This was founded in 1916. It is arguably the world's largest educational research association that exists and conference that exists. I am certain that attendance is dropping in this conference and has been for quite some time. I attended this conference back in 2019 when it was in Toronto, Canada, and I've told all those stories before. It was very enlightening from a brainwashing standpoint because, again, I was awake going into this conference, but when I came back, I said, we're at war. We are at war. There is no doubt about it that these conferences are filled with the most brainwashed, mind-numbing losers on the face of the planet. They quite literally have everything wrong. And it was frightening to be there, to be honest. I was scared because I was reading what they were presenting at the time. And it was alarming because none of it had anything to do with learning any real facts. Because again, let's face it, nothing is really new that's under the sun. I mean, the answers to everything have already been proven. They've already been proven. The question is can you find them or can you not? Are you willing to apply it or are you not? It's also the dead giveaway of any fraud in any business. When any business is consistently, quote unquote, engaging in continuous improvement, quote unquote, therein lies the real problem because they're trying to control their perception of what improvement means. And this is a huge issue. So back then in 2019, and again, you have to take into consideration the time frame here. It would have been the first or second week of April in 2019. Donald Trump was president of the United States, and I believe, if memory serves, the theme back then had to do with how to navigate a post-truth era. So it was 100% political, which is not surprising. They were assuming that, of course, because Donald Trump was in office, then everything was a lie. So how is it that we educate and navigate this educational landscape in a post-truth era where lies are just blindly accepted among the masses? Well, that leads me to this now. This year's conference has gone full racial. It is race-based like nobody's business. They might as well have called the conference How to Kill Whitey, because that's basically what it is. So, at a visual glance, the mural and the theme of the poster that they have is a brick wall with what you would stereotypically see in an inner city environment with all the urban rainbow colors all over this brick wall. And it is quite literally titled, the theme of the conference here is titled Dismantling Racial Injustice and Constructing Educational Possibilities, a Call to Action. Again, they're ostracizing white people. But what they're also doing with a great deal of these presentations, some of which I'll read, is that they are convincing white people who actually attend. And by the way, if you're a white person and you attend this, you're lost. You're completely lost. So why a person would even go is beyond me. I'm certain that this conference, of course, is going to be dominated by blacks. We can assume that, and plenty of Jews sprinkled around, along with Mexicans who engage in, the Latinx language and all that made up nonsense. But in some of these presentations, they're literally teaching white people that they're the problem. They're openly saying this. Now, keep in mind, if I showed up and I gave a presentation about how COVID is fake, black people are the problem, black crime is the largest problem, and of course it's all funded by the Jewish lobby, the moment I mention that, everybody stands up and walks out of the room. But they get to do it here. And they get to add this to their resume as being normal. And then, of course, they do what they do at the university level, which is they use these credentials to advance their career. They use it for tenure and promotion. They use it for 1,000 things. And by the way, of course, just to make this abundantly clear, clearly not all black people are the problem. That goes without saying. I mean, that's common sense that that's not the case. But either way, if you were to bring up real statistical fact regarding, again, crime, poverty, turnover rates in education and job placement and 1,000 other things. See, their answer from their end at a conference like this in particular now, their answer is it's white people's problem, that it's their fault, that they're the ones that are creating all of this. And so before I get into the actual program of this conference and I start reading off some of these titles and reading off some of these abstracts, I think an overall theme here that I want to bring up before I crack this nut open is that this is a level of brainwashing that cannot be fixed. It just can't be. These people are participating, and I'm talking about, again, the people who are, providing presentations and actually facilitating this whole conference. These people have lost the plot. It is quite literally a conference for the mentally insane. These people are not well. They have no idea what's really going on in the world. And they are walking around in the matrix that has been created for them, and they need it. They feel good in this made-up construct, which again is ironic because one of the words that they use with regularity, and I'll define it for you here based on their fake definition of this fake word, but the word that they use is a word called intersectionality. Now, this word, intersectionality, is arguably one of the dumbest and most retarded explanations for why they believe things are the way that they are. So if you look this up on Wikipedia, what you're going to see is you're going to see, and we've seen visuals like this before, where you have basically circles or bubbles, and they're all sort of overlapping one another, as if to say that they're all influencing one another in some way, or in varying degrees. And sometimes, of course, they're all overlapping at a particular point, thereby trying to imply that every single aspect of what they are defining and all these different characteristics or components, whatever, are influencing a much larger issue. So intersectionality essentially means that you can take any form of division, and as a result of that, they all overlap, thereby influencing the way that everybody does everything. The issue is that intersectionality is almost always used against white people. So this has to be a Marxist Jewish construct, without a doubt. And then, of course, who do they manipulate the most? Well, as it turns out, historically speaking, Marxists and communists and Bolsheviks and Jews have been manipulating blacks for a very long time. Right down to the local businesses that have been owned and property and, of course, slave trade and all of that. I mean, that's historic. That's a historic accuracy right there. But it's not an accident that they've created this racial tension or this made-up racial division and then sprinkled it specifically on the blacks and the black community, quote unquote, in order to, again, stir them up as much as humanly possible against whites. Because in these presentations, they don't go after Jews, they don't go after Mexicans, they don't go after, Hispanics, whomever, Asians. They don't do that. The vast majority of the people giving the presentations, in particular at this conference, happen to be Asian, Black, and Hispanic. They've completely X'd out white people. And again, at face value, looking at the presentation cover here, and certainly the title, and the poster design, if you're a white person, you're probably not going to want to go, unless, of course, you're a Marxist, in which case, you're in good company. What the white Marxist doesn't understand is that everybody at the conference is still coming after them, to the point where they want the white to hate themselves for just being white. Now, I hope you're asking yourself this question: Sean, what in the hell does this have anything to do with American K-12 education and higher education? The answer is nothing. It has nothing to do with it. But this is what the lobby is creating. They're creating this giant conglomerate of nothingness in order to sell to people to believe in something that's completely made up. It's like, honest to God, it's like giving a presentation about Sesame Street characters, and having an entire conference about it. It's completely fake. There isn't a single thing in any of this that's real. So, with that overall theme, let me get into this now. And again, bear with me because this should be eye-opening, I hope. Yes, I know that it's not that surprising to many individuals, but this is progressively getting worse, and it's not going to get better. And I think right here, they've jumped the shark and crossed a particular line that they'll never get back now, because I can't imagine, again, being white and wanting to attend this particular conference because it's intellectually insulting. There are 4 key speakers that are giving presentations at the forefront of this conference. And let me just read the intro here. Again, this is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from April 11th through the 14th. And of course, it's titled Learn, Engage, and Inspire. Well, they're doing the opposite of all of those things already, and they don't even know it. It says, each year, the American Educational Research Association's annual meeting is the world's largest gathering of education researchers and a showcase for groundbreaking, innovative studies in an array of areas. With more than 2,500 sessions to choose from, the 2024 annual meeting will provide a dynamic experience with opportunities to learn from prominent scholars, discover the latest research, engage in stimulating conversations, and foster professional relationships. Okay. Now, if you were someone like me, of course, like I said earlier, and you showed up to one of these conferences and you didn't even give a presentation, let's say, for example, you're me, okay? You're a white man, shaved head, and you go into one of these conferences and you start asking questions. How do you think they're going to look at you? How do you think they're going to respond to you? Is it going to be with further questions? Is it going to be with polite dialogue? Or are they going to just turn on you? It's gotten to the point where they'll just flat out turn on you. They will look at you and assume you're wrong because you're white. Because most of the presentations in this conference have to do with race and racial division. But first, ladies and gentlemen, I would be remiss if I, of course, didn't mention this particular policy that they have in place for attending their conference. I'll let you just kind of stir that around your brain for a minute to figure out what exactly you think I'm alluding to here. What policy do you think they have in place that requires you, in order to attend, that something has to be in place first? If you said COVID vaccination status, you would be correct. They actually have this. I'm going to read this to you because this is the frame of mind of these people. When you click on their website, it says COVID-19 vaccination policy. And then it says the following, quote, to attend AERA's 2024 annual meeting, and then this is all in bold, all participants, except those with a medically documented condition or a personal attestation of religious reasons, must have up-to-date COVID-19 vaccination and at least one booster if eligible. Mask wearing is not required. Mutual respect and health and safety remain priority goals. AERA will use Safe Access, which is apparently some kind of a vendor, as the vendor responsible for confirming the vaccination or exemption status of registrants. It says shortly after completion of your registration, you will receive a personalized email invitation from Safe Access to verify your vaccination status. AERA encourages those attending the meeting with U.S. and non-U.S. vaccination cards to do so in advance. Safe Access will also have staff on site in Philadelphia to review the vaccination status required to obtain a badge and gain access to the annual meeting. Individuals who have completed safe access for other AERA events since October of 2023 will be cleared without needing to further upload documentation. No attendee will be admitted to AERA meeting areas without a vaccination or exemption verification. We appreciate your patience during the health and safety process and thank you for doing your part to keep your event safe for all attendees. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not even into the meeting presentations yet. I haven't even gotten there. And these people are already on a different planet. Again, it begs the question, what is it that these people just don't know? And the answer is everything. They know nothing about what is going on in the world. And these are the individuals, again, responsible for making up the landscape that is higher education, specifically teacher education also. And as you've heard me say, the well is dry. Well, I would take this a step further based on all of this information that I've already gone over here, without even getting into the presentations yet. I would go so far as to say not only is the well dry, there is no well. It's completely caved in now. It's completely covered. It's destroyed. It's been blown up. There is no well. This is game over. This is game over for American education, which explains the behavior of the people that you're seeing still attending these board meetings and screaming at board members to change their ways and to change who they are and stop being an asshole and stop being this way and don't do this with the pornographic books and blah, 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 blah. All the screaming and the yelling isn't accomplishing anything anymore because, as even Dr. Robin McCutcheon said, not only is the candle burning at both ends, it's burning in the middle. There is no candle anymore. It's gone. In fact, before I get into the presentations and break down the conference even more, which I'm going to do in detail, let me read you this, just based on jab data real quick. It ties in perfectly. And it also ties in with a social observation that I've made, which I'm sure you've made too. This right here is from the CDC, which of course can't be trusted, so I don't trust any of these statistics because they're trying to make it look like things are working out in their favor when clearly they are not. But this is as of March 29th of this year, 2024. And it says vaccination trends update. There's 4 bullet points. The first one says the percent of the population reporting receipt of COVID-19, influenza, and RSV vaccines remains low for children and adults. It says the percent of the population reporting receipt of the updated 23-24 COVID-19 vaccine is 14.1% for children and 22.6% for adults 18 and over, including 42.1% among adults age 65 and up. Now, if you're like me, you've noticed that people, of course, are still wearing masks even to this day, which is beyond pathetic and, in fact, it's just downright depressing. An observation, however, that I've noted is that the vast majority of the people wearing the masks are, in fact, the elderly. They are individuals who are far older, clearly in their 70s and or 80s or older than that. Again, I was in a grocery store not that long ago, a week or two ago, and sure enough, came across this older couple, and they're both wearing the N95 masks, the black big ones, and they're just sucking air. I mean, not even air. They're just breathing in their own toxins on a constant basis. And again, I always say to myself this, I stare at them for a minute, my mood changes almost immediately, and then I say to myself, what is it that they're thinking about me when I'm walking past them with bright eyes, a vibrant step, and I'm not pale, looking like I'm suffocating myself to death, not wearing a mask? What is it that they think about me? And what is it that they then tell themselves to rationalize their position on why they're doing what they're doing? I mean, this is the head game I play on a day in and day out basis, certainly when I see these individuals. It's astounding to me. But these statistics from the CDC go on, 2 more bullet points. It says the percent, rather, of the population reporting receipt of a flu vaccine is 52% for children and 48.2% for adults 18 and over, including 73.9% among adults age 65 and up. So clearly, of all the generations that have bought into this, it's the 65 and up range that are still taking these shots if the CDC is to be believed. Again, it says the percent of adults, this is the last bullet point, the percent of adults age 65 and up that report receiving an RSV vaccine is 23.6%. This is the updated vaccination trends in the United States, so saith the CDC. So back to AERA, you have to be jabbed and boosted to attend. That's assuming that you don't have some kind of an exemption, which you then have to show them. The very practice of having to show people these kinds of things is the data harvesting and the medical tracking that they want to do with people, but what these people don't understand as they continuously give up their own rights without knowing is that they're going to be dead in the future from this very practice. They're quite literally, again, participating in their own demise, and they don't know it. They're willfully walking right toward the flame. And they're writing papers about it. but they're writing papers about why they think things aren't the way that they should be as they continue to, again, walk toward the flame. You talk about distraction and manipulation. It's pretty clear that their perception is not reality. And I think this pretty much proves it. So let me get into the opening presenters of this conference. First of all, the opening statement is going to be made by a Kimberly or Kimberley, accent mark, W. Crenshaw. It says, kick off the annual meeting with a highly engaging and intellectually stimulating lecture by a Kimberley Crenshaw, whose groundbreaking work on intersectionality and structural racism is strongly connected to the work of education researchers and practitioners. Her lecture will lead into a conversation with AERA President Tyrone Howard and audience Q&A. The welcome reception will immediately follow. Oh, I'm sure it will be stimulating. Again, it's in the Q&A where you'd have to cut these people down a peg, but it wouldn't matter. You'd be on an island all by yourself if you were to do that. Then following that, there's your stereotypical mingling session, which is a complete and utter waste of time. And then Saturday evening, it looks like, you get a presidential address, and this is from Tyrone himself. It says, learn from the wisdom and knowledge of AERA President Tyrone Howard. The presidential address is an annual can't-miss event where the state and future of the field are examined and attendees are inspired. And he teaches at the University of California in Los Angeles. They're controlling this, and they don't know that they're being manipulated to destroy their own line of work. I mean, you talk about useful idiots. It's amazing. Then you have the 2024 Distinguished Lecturers. It says the AERA Distinguished Lecture and the Wallace Foundation Distinguished Lecture will be delivered by Gloria J. Ladson Billings and Dolores Delgado Bernal, respectively. So we have a black woman and then we have a Hispanic woman. And Dolores Delgado Bernal's paper or lecture is titled Disrupting Dominant Research Paradigms, a Collective Journey to Chicana Latina Feminista Methodologies. Gesundheit. As for Gloria and her presentation, it is titled Not Yet at Plessy, 70 Years Post-Brown. Honest to God, these people play victim, and yet they're making money hand over fist talking about nothing, giving presentations at conferences that they're leading that are about nothing. Again, they're all being manipulated and they don't even know it. So now let me get into the particular divisions, what these divisions mean, and then what I actually searched when I was bouncing around these divisions. Because, again, this right here is where the rubber meets the road. You have a lot of political discussions that take place. There's a lot of administration things that take place, but then you get into the actual division presentations. And they're alphabetized, and then they have particular titles associated with them, and this is basically how it's always been. This is where the 1005 presentations and papers being presented actually exist. So on their actual website, you can find all of this, and you can read the abstracts, and you can see the authors' names and where they teach and what they do and whatever else. They have Division A through L, everything from Apple to Larry. Division A is titled Administration, so any kind of administrative papers or research that's being done, it's going to get tossed into that division. Division B is Curriculum Studies. Division C is Learning and Instruction. Division D is Measurement and Research Methodologies. Division E is Counseling and Human Development. Division F is History and Historiography. Division G is Social Context in Education. Division H is Research, Evaluation, and Assessment in Schools. Division I is Education in the Professions. Division J is Post-Secondary Education. Division K, which is the one where I presented back in 2019, is Teaching and Teacher Education. And then Division L is Educational Policies and Politics. Of those divisions, the largest one is Division K, which is Teaching and Teacher Education. The next largest is Post-Secondary Education, which is Division J. And then you have Learning and Instruction, which is the third largest. Third largest. And then you have Social Context and Education, which is the fourth largest. Then it basically pitters out. So there are 215 presentations in the Teaching and Teacher Education division. Now, when you click on these, and you're going to hear my mouse maybe click from time to time, but when you click on these, it gets into the particular division, and then you can click on the entire division, and then it gives you the ability to search out the results based on particular keywords. So you type in particular keywords, and then, of course, the titles and abstracts of these presentations show up. Given the fact that most of this is about race, if I type in race, just within Division A, which is administration, there are two presentations that pop up. The first one is titled Transforming Educational Leadership, Righting Wrongs of Race and Difference. That's the first presentation. That's at 9:35 in the morning, right out of the gate. And then Sunday, there's a presentation that is titled Toward Increased Cultural Connectedness, Race Consciousness, and Critical Care, School Administrator and Student Perspectives. Now, here's the other thing too. Along with race, and I had to do this first, actually, before I even typed in race, I typed in the two names, Trump by itself, and I typed in Biden by itself. In 2019, if you'd have typed in Trump, you would have seen his name in almost every presentation. I'm not joking. When I got to that conference in Toronto and I grabbed the book, it was as thick as a dictionary. And I flipped it open, and you're reading these again. You're reading all the divisions, and you're reading the presentations and everything else. But then you're reading, of course, the titles and some of the abstracts of these presentations. They all had to do with race, Trump, lying, and just a bunch of other things. But the name Trump itself was in a great deal of those presentations back then. Having done that same search with this, in this entire program for the conference, rather, the term Trump doesn't show up once. Neither does the term Biden or the name Biden. They don't show up at all. But race does. Racism, racist, race, and so does COVID, which is kind of what I want to get to here also. When you type in COVID, COVID, nothing shows up after Division A or within Division A. So then you can bounce back and you get into curriculum studies. Then you click on all of division and then again filter the search results, COVID. I just typed that in, popped it up, nothing. Nothing for curriculum studies. Don't worry though, I'm getting to it. Learning and instruction, this is Division C. When you click on this and you type in COVID, nothing pops up. Nothing pops up for the next one either, but when you get down to, and I'm just going to take this little side street for just a second, getting back to the whole racism talk and all that nonsense. When you click on Division E, which is Counseling and Human Development, as you've heard me say, this right here is one of the major inroads that all of that nonsense talk about racial division and race this and race that, and you're a white supremacist whether you know it or not. This right here is where it makes its final stand. This is really where it's dug its heels in, has to do with the human development and counseling and mental health services and all that nonsense. One of the very first presentations also here is titled Constructing Racially Just Educational Experiences, Problems and Solutions from Adolescence to Emerging Adulthood. So remember, if you're not black, you know nothing about race. And you know nothing about oppression, even though, and this is the irony, the entire presentation and conference is based on their perceptions of oppression and you being white oppressing other people because you're white. The next one is titled Navigating Professional Issues in Counseling and Education. Another one is Engaging in Anti-Racist Efforts and Inclusive Learning Across Contexts. That's interesting. Another one here is titled Equipping School Counselors for Inclusive Post-Secondary Transitions, Navigating Student Shifting Plans, Racial Injustice, and College Readiness Strategies. Translation is, let's make it easier for anybody to get into college, as if somehow that's going to make anything better. And then it just keeps going through the entire racial dialogue. Understanding how educators interact with and inform adolescents' ethnic racial identities. Promoting equity and inclusion in schools among counselors and principals. Now, if I change divisions and I go to Division F, which is History and Historiography, and I type in race in the search bar, there are 3 presentations that pop up. Now, what's interesting too is that some of these, of course, are paper presentations, and then others are mentoring sessions, and others are called roundtable sessions, where you're sitting at a round table with other researchers and you're all presenting your papers one at a time. There are 3 presentations here. One of them is called the Sankofa Experience, Demystifying the Past, Recasting the Future. I have no idea what that means, and I don't even care. The next one is titled Get Out, Disrupting Education via Space, Race, and Policy in the 20th Century. And then the last one, which is on Sunday morning, which no one will attend, because no one stays around for Sunday, except for the people actually giving the presentation. It's titled Race, Religion, and Nationalism, Symbols and Action in Education History. Now, if I move to the next division, which is Division G, this is titled Social Context in Education. As you might expect, this is where you're going to get a lot of the race-based stuff. In fact, right out of the gate on Wednesday at noon, they're leading a 4-hour pre-conference mentoring session titled Catalyst for Hope, Imagining a World with Color. Here's another one. It is titled Loud and Clear, Female Muslim Scholarship on the Muslim American Educational Experience. Here's another one titled America Has a Problem, Sista Scholars, rebellion as resilience. SISTA, SISTA. You see what I mean? They're degrading themselves. and they don't even know it. They're degrading themselves. Here's another one titled Centering Black Students' Agency Across Educational Spaces. Civic Education in an Era of Political Turmoil. There's another one. There's another one, Black Futures and Childhoods, Imagining Liberatory Development and Education for Young Black Children. Here's Black Literacies. It's titled Centering Black Crit. I don't even know what that is. And Listening to Black Students' Experiences. Another one called Racialized Perspectives on Educational Policy. You see how deep this goes? Another one titled Teachers and Teacher Educators of Color, a roundtable session with multiple presentations and different kinds of papers. But in this, again, social context, division of education, if you type in COVID, there's one presentation that pops up and it's a roundtable session. So what they'll do is they'll title the roundtable session, they'll give it a title that they think exemplifies or combines all the different papers of the people who are sitting at this actual physical roundtable. And so here's the title that they came up with. It's titled Critical Discourse Analysis, The Politics of Censorship, Book Banning, and COVID-19 Research. Now, if I click on this, there's 3 papers that are being presented, and here's the titles of them. The first one is titled Bound by Time, a discourse analysis of COVID-19 related education research. The next one is titled Dismantling Book Banning and Constructing Inclusive Education. And then the last one is called News Discourse of Education Censorship. So allow me to summarize these very quickly. They're telling you that if you want the gay books gone and the pornographic books gone, then there's something wrong with you. You're just a Nazi book burner, quote unquote. And oh, by the way, COVID is real. And of course, as you might imagine, COVID has had a negative impact on American education, and we need to put our heads together as to figure out why that's the case. In fact, joking aside, when it comes to all of these COVID presentations and papers that do exist in this conference, and I would say there's probably maybe 10 of them total, the vast majority of them are talking about the very problem that they were responsible for, that they believed, that they created and perpetuated, and now they're claiming that they can be the solution to the problem that was manufactured in the first place, that isn't even real, that doesn't exist, that they blindly went along with and believed. Now they're going to be the ones to somehow create it, or create a solution. This is how deep the manipulation goes. They're actually so full of themselves about something that isn't even real that they're writing papers on how to solve the thing that isn't even real, that they think is real. If you have a headache, you should by now, because this is the entire landscape. This is it. This is what a business looks like when it doesn't do the thing that it's really supposed to do, which is just teach facts. Because you can't teach facts if you don't have people who don't know the facts who are doing the teaching. Therein lies the problem. Let me skip divisions here. The next division is Division H, which is Research, Evaluation, and Assessment in Schools. When I click on that, as you would expect, there's race throughout. Again, it almost goes without saying. But when I type in COVID, one pops up. One paper. It's titled COVID-19 Impacts, the Then, the Now, and Predictions for the Future. Allow me to read this abstract. This is rich. In fact, my apologies. There's 3 papers that are presented within this particular presentation. In fact, I forgot that part. Very rare. Well, I should say this. What happens in these presentations is you'll have 3 presenters basically sitting at the same table at the front of a room. And then they play a PowerPoint presentation, and then they each have their turn, essentially. They'll each speak for whatever it is, maybe 30 minutes. So you're in the room for an hour and a half. And then, and each one gives their presentation, but there's 3 here on COVID. So these 3 individuals will be in the same room. They'll present one at a time, and then they'll take questions and blah, blah, blah. The first one is titled Envisioning a Future That Defies Predictions, Characterizing the Differential Impact of COVID-19 Using Longitudinal Modeling. Now, again, the irony of this is amazing, in particular the last presentation. So let me just read these presentations first, and then I'll hit you with the irony, and you'll figure it out already. The second one is titled Predicting Advanced Placement and Dual Enrollment Participation by School Demographics and Urbanicity During COVID-19. So remember, blacks were disenfranchised during COVID, and that's just the way that it is because we say so. Well, no, you disenfranchised yourselves by believing something is real when it isn't. And then the last one, and this is over the top. It's titled Make Math Fun, Student and Teacher Perspectives for Post-COVID Mathematical Learning and Engagement. They're actually creating a paper on how teachers can teach COVID statistics as a math lesson to students. And that using math with related to the COVID happenings is somehow going to benefit the students in the room and can also benefit the teachers because you can wrap your arms around this thing that isn't even real. The irony there, of course, almost goes without saying, that they're not really going to look at the real statistics, are they? They're not really going to use the real statistics to actually engage in any kind of a math lesson, because if they did, they would have to use the VAERS report, and then they would have to say, well, the VAERS report is only 1% accurate. That's only a 1%, if not less than 1%, application or uploading of the actual adverse reactions. And oh, by the way, let's look at these 9 pages of single-spaced thousands of adverse intentional reactions as a result of taking these shots. And oh, by the way, let's look at the increase on this bar graph of autoimmune conditions in full-blown AIDS after the shot taking. Not to mention the one bar graph that we've all seen where it shows the death rate increasing in 2021, 2022, and 2023 at a rate that's never existed before. Or how about the other math lesson with a pie chart that shows the fact that the COVID shots have killed more people than all shots combined in the history of forever? They're not going to show that either. So what are they actually learning as a math lesson regarding COVID? Not the truth. They're not learning the facts because they don't know what they are, which again butts up right against every other point that I've made, which you know as well, which is, of course, you can't teach the facts if you don't know what they are. Here's another one within that same division. Again, we're in the Division H, Research, Evaluation, and Assessment in Schools. If you type in race in the search bar, you end up with the title of this presentation, Resurgence of Backlash to Redressing Pernicious and Persistent Inequities, Navigating Race, Class, and Systemic Equity-Driven Improvement. Isn't that nice? What a mouthful. What a mouthful of nonsense. And then there are 4 papers that are presented within this particular room. The Theory and Practice of Equity Expansive Technical Assistance, Critical Collaborative Inquiry to Drive Systemic Change. Boring. Another one, Troubling Dominant Approaches to Educational Inquiry, Expanding and Enhancing Contextual Illumination of Systemic Inequalities. Boring. Equity Expansive Critical Collaborative Inquiry, Artifacts, Processes, Participants, and Innovations. Also boring. 3 of these, by the way, are from Indiana University. And the last one, School Board Partnership and Momentum for Sustained Attention to Equity. These people have lost their minds. They've all lost their minds. I'm almost done with these divisions. Let me just keep going here. Again, Division I now, which is education in the professions. As you would expect, you type in race, you're going to get all the race-based nonsense. If you type in COVID, nothing pops up. Hallelujah. Now we are down to Division J, post-secondary education. This has 138 papers in total. If you type in COVID, you get two particular exhibits, two separate roundtable sessions. The first one is titled International Student Experiences, COVID, Race, and Sense of Belonging. And then another one titled COVID-19 and Community Colleges. Can timely research accelerate their recovery and support racially minoritized students? Honest to God. Now here's a rather, I would say, common observation here too. Within the International Student Experiences COVID, Race, and Sense of Belonging roundtable session, you have 4 papers that are being presented, and all 4 are being given by the Chinese. One is from Boston College and Columbia University, another one is from the University of Wisconsin, another one from the University of Florida, and another one from Michigan State. These papers are titled the following. Again, all Chinese. Radicalized Experience in the Ensuing Racial Awareness of International Graduate Students of Color. That's the first one. That was from a Michigan State University person by the name of Si Young Hong. Not a white man. The next one, Transitional Radicalization and Sense-Making. An exploratory inter-ethnic comparison of Asian international students' post-COVID experiences. And then the next one is titled 2 International Student Mothers Navigating and Transforming U.S. Graduate Education Schools. And then the last one, You Are Welcome Here, ? The 2 Faces of American Higher Education Toward Chinese International Students. So one of the interesting aspects of this, I think, is that you also, as you would expect, have a very direct Chinese communistic infiltration within these conferences, where they too play the victim. So you have the Chinese communists who are, again, blaming the white man and saying, well, they're run by white people and they're run by this people and that people. Joke's on all of them. Most of these universities are run by Jews or blacks. But either way, with that aside for a minute, they still, too, are playing the victim within these universities. And they're claiming again that, well, they kicked us out and we didn't feel welcome because of the Wuhan coronavirus. Well, joke's on you. Everybody was lied to. And as you might remember, before the whole COVID lie, it was the Confucius centers that were being shut down because they were known spy operations. And they were being closed by the Department of Justice. And that funding wasn't going to come their way anymore. And universities weren't going to receive the funding if they continued to harbor these these infiltrators, these spies, these Chinese spies. And then they packed their bags and they left. And isn't that interesting how most of the Chinese students just up and left? Weird. It's almost like some of them were spies. Strange, isn't it? They all hung out with one another. But don't worry, we're the ones oppressing them. And that's, of course, what they want everybody to believe. Now here we are in Division K, ladies and gentlemen, teaching and teacher education, the largest division at the entire conference. When you type in COVID, there is one poster session that pops up. And a poster session is basically for the individual who did not have a paper that was accepted. So they look at them and they say, we're not going to accept your paper. We would if somebody else drops out, but now we're relegating you to a poster presentation. So you can basically have this poster that you present to us and it'll sit on a little, an easel kind of thing, and then you can talk about it for like 5 minutes and then be on your way. And that's about it. And they sometimes set themselves up with the other vendors, for people who are selling things. But somebody will walk by, basically walk by your poster and they might ask you to talk about it or usually not. It just kind of depends. Either way, this particular poster is titled Ethnic Minority ECE Providers Perceived Needs of Support and Training Following COVID-19. And ECE stands for Early Childhood Education. So let me read this abstract because, as you would expect, there's also a racial tinge to this. In fact, it's all about race. And I think that the conclusion of this abstract is rather funny. It says the following. In this study, we asked early childhood educator providers perceived need on 1, implementing COVID-19 protocols, 2, professional network, and 3, online trainings including various topics such as trauma-informed care, children's social and emotional development, and behavior management. It said to examine differences, in ECE providers' perceived need by race. We conducted a series of a one-way analysis of variance and tested the group differences by post hoc Bonferroni test. Results showed significant differences in the perceived need by race. Shocking. It says, Black and Asian early childhood education providers reported significantly higher need than white providers in guidance on COVID-19 protocols, access to a professional network, online trainings, and child abuse recognition/reporting, unquote. You've got to be joking. Now, why is that, do you think? Why is it that based on their study, if it's to be believed, that blacks and Asians who teach elementary school, 2 blacks and Asians we can assume, are having a hard, and this is from Johns Hopkins University, these 2 individuals, why is it that they had a harder time managing the whole COVID stuff and claimed that they needed more training than, say, white teachers or white students? Because there's an element in their study that I'm certain they didn't examine, and it has to do with believability. Who believed it and who didn't? I'm not saying that whites didn't believe it and knew that it was fake. They clearly bought into it. There's no doubt about it. But you also have numerous schools, for example, in South Dakota, primarily white, who didn't ever shut down. They never locked themselves down. And we know what the rationalization would be, again, among inner city individuals. They would say, well, the reason that they didn't lock themselves down was because they live in rural areas. They're not around so many sick people or people who could have COVID, or that term asymptomatic, people who could be sick and not even know it. They live out in the cornfields. They live in the hills. They live in the plains. That's why they didn't lock themselves down, because it was a bigger problem in a more densely populated area. No, it's quite the opposite. If you live in a more densely populated area, you're more likely to see the hive mind. You're more likely to have brainwashed individuals. You're more likely to have individuals who just believe things that are not real, because they're looking around themselves at their environment and the people around them, and they're going, oh, wow, they're all doing this, so I guess I better too. And then they fall for it. Honest to God, it really is one of those mind-bending variables that exists in the minds of these so-called educators, is that instead of looking up the facts themselves and investigating what the real facts are, when they don't understand something, they just scream that they need more professional development. They scream that they need more training. I need someone to help me think about this. I need someone to tell me what to do about this, because I don't know how to deal with my own thoughts, and I don't know how to behave, and I don't know how to act. The larger problem here is that it's human beings not knowing how to be a human being. That's a massive issue. And as you've heard me say, it's not a survivable characteristic. If you're walking around as an NPC, regardless of your profession, you're not going to make it. If you're incapable of individualized thought, and all you're doing is screaming at your own business and or government, which, let's face it, in the education business, it is government, you're screaming at them to give you the answer. Well, they're the ones that gave you the COVID lie. So what kind of an answer would they actually provide you? More contact tracing? More distancing? More mask wearing? More shot taking? More proof of all of the above? These people are nuts. They engaged without thinking in the largest example of child abuse that's ever existed in the entire profession and across this nation in the blink of an eye. And now they're writing research papers about it and poster presentations and roundtable situations where, again, they're trying to explain to the individuals around them how there's all these racial inequities and I just can't believe it. Well, maybe, if you actually took a real analysis of who believed COVID and who didn't, and you actually divided that up by race, or you divided that up even by, say, sex, I bet there would be a serious difference. I would venture to guess that white males didn't believe the COVID lie more than others. I'm taking a guess, but I'm assuming that that's relatively accurate. Then when you go below that, I would say something like, well, it could be white females are next. And then who knows? Maybe it's black males are next, and black males were the next ones to not believe it. Again, I'm taking a guess here, just based on some basic historic facts and some of the dialogue that was taking place at the time. I'm not saying that certain individuals, of course, within those particular demographics don't get wrapped up in the lie, fall for it, inject themselves, and end up dying as a result. We know that that's happened. But having not conducted the study, it seems rather dismissive of the simple fact that it could be that your location, the people you hang around, and the way that you are as an individual, even again with gender and race aside, plays a massive role in this. Again, I've been over it a million times that when the schools locked down one at a time and they all started closing, it was the hive mind in action. You were watching it in action. Local county health departments were saying you need to close your schools. This is an airborne respiratory virus and we don't want to get people sick. All of that was a lie. All of it. And the people who fall for lies the easiest, and the people who are the easiestly manipulated, are the people who don't think for themselves, don't critically think, and live, demographically speaking, in a hive mind environment. And of course, they work in a hive mind environment. And then that pulls in another element, which I'm sure isn't discussed very often, which has to do with retaliation and retribution. That if you speak your mind about what you know to be true, that you're fearful of losing your job. So the lone individual against the masses who stands up in a faculty meeting in an American K-12 school or even university setting and openly says to the whole faculty, don't take the shots, they'll kill you. That person will be ostracized and laughed at among the masses. But that person will survive, as opposed to the others that are doing the laughing and the finger pointing. And then time passes, as we have seen, and look what's happened with the profession. You don't have bus drivers, you don't have teachers, you don't have administrators. They're all sick and they're all dead. And or you're having a hard time finding substitute teachers because they're sick, they're dead, and no one wants to enter these environments because you've all abused children and you're all, a mining camp for the criminally insane. Now, finally, here's the last division. The last division is Division L, which is Educational Policies and Politics. And as you would expect, again, it's filled with the race-based nonsense. It's a big division, lots of presentations. Again, how do we communicate with one another, and how can we be better administrators, and what about professional development, and what do we need to have in place, and blah, blah, blah. All of that's there. Then you type in COVID, and there are 4 presentations that pop up. There's a roundtable session too, which of course is multiple papers, and then same thing with the paper sessions, but there's 3 specifically. The first one is titled Responding to Crises, Education in the Wake of COVID-19. Now, again, that's the broad title that's been given, but there are 4 papers within this particular room where they're going to be giving this. And it looks like, again, we're talking about University of Southern California, Michigan State University, University of California, San Diego, University of Wisconsin, Mississippi Center for Justice is another one. Here are the papers and here are their titles. The first one is titled One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, Engagement with Communities under the American Rescue Plan Act. Another one is titled Whole Child Development Losses and Inequalities During the Pandemic, Cross-State Analysis of Achievement and Well-Being Trends. The next one is titled Surviving in the Wake, Black Families' Experiences During the COVID-19 Pandemic. The third one is titled COVID-19 and Education Impact Study, an Exacerbation of Education Inequality in Mississippi. And then the last one, We Did Too Much Caring, quote unquote, Framing the Problem of School Discipline During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Oh, that's rich. We did too much caring. Allow me to read this abstract. It says, quote, Upon the return to in-person schooling following the COVID-19 lockdown, teachers called attention to students they saw as suffering socially and emotionally and whose behavior they viewed as markedly different than students in prior years. It says, drawing on a comparative case study of 2 elementary and 1 middle school in 1 Wisconsin school district, and using theoretical tools from racial capitalism and care theory, this paper demonstrates how teachers made sense of the problem, quote unquote, of school discipline before, during, and after the COVID-19 lockdown. I detail prominent framings and conclude with implications for more caring, just schools, unquote. This person is nuts. Again, they've created an entire presentation about schools who believed the lie while not calling it a lie and actually believing it. And then talking about how to better address the fact that in reality, they've actually just lied to everybody by they themselves believing the lie first. And then that lie shit just rolls downhill and lands into the laps of students. And then you cause them to believe it and become fearful of it. And now you're sad that what? They're not learning anymore? You can't fix this. It's too far gone. If anybody, and I mean it, if anybody showed up to this conference and gave a presentation in a room with a PowerPoint presentation, it would be so easy to do from a factual standpoint because everybody in the room would believe the exact opposite. And that alone should show the people in the room that they might have it wrong because everybody in this room and these rooms is thinking alike. I noticed that back in 2019. No one was saying anything different. And when someone was saying something that was remarkably offensive to one's sex or race, they sat there quietly. They would even nod their head in agreement. This is CIA MK Ultra mind control. And they've got all these people by the back of the neck. And they're gone. They're just gone. There's no saving this. This cannot be reformed. This is again, this is why I'm going to keep beating this dead horse on the people who call for reforming the education system. This right here is proof that you can't do it. There's nothing to save. It has to be done away with. These people have to leave this profession if they don't die off from the shots that they took. Eventually, they will be out of a job. And God only knows what they'll end up doing. But as far as the end times is concerned, because I know a lot of people are talking about the end times and Christ coming back and taking people with him and, eliminating a mass majority of the population and 1,000 other things. I would say this about the end times. This is the end times for American education. It cannot be reformed. You're never going to get a Chris Rufo. You're never going to get a Karlin Borshenko. You're never going to get a Libs of TikTok reading what I just read and bringing up what I've just brought up. Why? Because they've never attended these conferences and I have. They've never presented at these conferences and I have. In multiple countries and I have. They haven't. Now, you don't have to in order to know the larger scheme of what's going on here. But those people think that education can be reformed, and it can't. In fact, I'll agree with Karlin Borshenko on this. She's a homeschooling advocate, which is great, and I'm sure most of the other names that I just mentioned are probably homeschool advocates also. But this right here is where the real juice is. It's in these conferences, these education conferences, and this is the biggest one. This right here should show you that this is where they are heading. There's no recognition of them being wrong. There's no recognition of them believing lies. There's no recognition of them being manipulated and them coming to that realization and saying, wait a minute, COVID isn't real. There was no pandemic. Masks didn't work and the shots are killing everybody who takes them. That's not being presented. They're doubling down on their lie. That's why this will not survive. That's why all of this will end. And it's going to end in our lifetime. We're going to see this collapse because it is collapsing now. Thank you for listening to all of that, by the way. Again, that's the kind of in-depth examination of what I would call certainly a case study of a very specified environment where those individuals, of course, are coming from endless environments across not only the United States, but the world. There are numerous international speakers and presenters that present at AERA every single year. And again, I know I teased it a little bit earlier when in a earlier episode rather, when I said that I was going to be attending potentially, the Midwestern Educational Research Association here in Cincinnati. I'm not going to go to that. And I'm not going to go basically for one health-related reason. I don't want to get shed on. I mean, that's really the main reason. I mean, I was lying in bed and I thought, do I really want to go? And then my eyes got huge and I went, no, I definitely don't, because I don't want to get shed on. These people are triple, quadruple jabbed. And they have to be in order to show up. I mean, everybody's got to be glowing at this conference by now. Third arms growing out of their foreheads. Not to mention, the population has to be dwindling. There's no way that they're getting a lot of presentations. Again, they have over 1,500 papers just in the divisions alone, combined. So, I mean, at the very least, there's going to be that many people, if not double that. But even so, there's just no way. For health reasons alone, there's no way. Not to mention, of course, if you mention electromagnetism at a conference like this, they'll all start hissing at you and, run out of the room like the zombies they are. I mean, it's beyond outrageous. But this is the landscape. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. And again, the Chris Rufos of the world aren't going to do what I just did right there. He doesn't do that. He doesn't get into the actual specified conferences and do a dig on what really goes on within these conferences and how this is really one of the more foundational levels of the entire business. This is what the Heritage Foundation doesn't have figured out. The Heritage Foundation thinks that they can stop this. The Jewish lobby-funded Heritage Foundation believes that they can reform this, that it won't matter who gets in the White House next. We're a conservative outlet, and we're going to fund the reformation of education as we know it. And don't worry, because I wrote this whole paper for the Heritage Foundation. We have a plan. You have no plan. Your plan is to kick the can down the road and make as much money on the backs of more lies that you possibly can make. And just keep that lie going. Just wearing a different color tie while you're doing it. You're not fooling people like me, and they're certainly not fooling this audience. But, yeah, that's it. I mean, that's it. Here's a couple of jab-related headlines, just again, just off the top here in case people don't think that the shots are killing people. This was from Zero Hedge. It was titled Heart Scarring Detected Over 1 Year After COVID-19 Vaccinations, So Saith Studies. It says it was detected more than 1 year after COVID-19 vaccination in some people who suffered myocarditis following the receipt of the shot, researchers reported in new studies. It says a third of 60 patients with follow-up cardiac imaging done more than 12 months after their myocarditis diagnosis had persistent late gadolinium enhancement, or LGE, which is, in the majority of cases, reflective of heart scarring. Australian researchers reported in a preprint of a new study published on March 22nd. Here's another one. Louisiana, this is also an interesting aspect of this, which I wonder if any of those COVID presenters at AERA have a grasp of, that entire states in the United States are not participating and actually voting to not participate in anything that is WEF or WHO related in the future. And Louisiana happens to be one of them. They have voted to not participate in anything that is World Health Organization or WEF related, specifically relating to their so-called pandemic treaty. They've openly said it. They voted on it. It was unanimous. So there's that. Here's another one. Vernon Davis, former NFL player of, I believe, at least 3 teams, the Miami Dolphins, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Buffalo Bills, died at the age of 35. No suicide detected, no drug use, nothing. Found unresponsive in his grandmother's home or in his home, one of the two. Random NFL death from a healthy former NFL player. Weird. Was he jabbed? I mean, we can assume these things, can't we? There was also another female who passed out unresponsive and needed chest compressions on the football pitch in Europe. Her name has slipped my mind, my apologies, but that also happened. Strange. Then there's this from the expose-news.com titled Shocking, U.S. has recorded over 1 million excess deaths among the over 65s since the FDA approved the COVID-19 vaccine. 1 million excess deaths. Remember, it's the over 65s that are still wearing the masks, by and large, and it's the over 65s that are still taking the shots. But there's no correlation between any of that. They just die because they're over 65. They got all the charts here. They got all the math. Perhaps I should send this to the presenters who claim that, teaching children about COVID and COVID statistics is important. Perhaps they should get this article in their inbox. It's mind-numbing crazy, ladies and gentlemen. But again, this is the landscape. This is what's happening. And that's the business of education. And it's the COVID lie that's taken it down, and it's the bioweapon that's taken it down, and everybody's blind obedience to just going along with it. So, congratulations again. If you're unjabbed and you didn't fall for it, you made it, hopefully. But if you are jabbed and you fell for it, well, good luck, because I don't think it's going to go too well in the future. Certainly not in your line of work anyway, not when it comes to the field of American education. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and I will catch you on Friday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.